Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to The Debrief, a weekly Q&A show from your friends here at Sandals Church with Pastor Matt Brown. We are normally doing tough questions to real answers, or any order you want to put that in. But right now we are studying the Enneagram. We got Pastor Matt Brown in the house ready to take on some questions about the number 7 enthusiast on the Enneagram. And you got some of your most sevenest, wildest, and craziest friends.
Yeah, one of my best friends, Matt's a 7, and then we have Kelly, who is... I don't know if she's my friend or not, but she's on staff. We're working on our relationship, and I just threw her under the bus.
Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, apparently. I don't want Pastor Matt introducing me.
Yeah.
So I'm Kelly Wilzel. I do the connections. I oversee connections department, which is getting people here and getting them to stay at Sandals. So all about the people.
Actually, as in your role here on staff, Kelly is directly responsible for kind of all the logistics that have gone on behind the scenes as it relates to real workshops and this whole discovery process. So let's just put in like a quick pause right now for everyone who's listening to this right now to mentally applaud you in their head and thank you and your team for all the work you've done.
Yeah, she's fantastic. She's done like literally most of the work in terms of putting this together, her and Tammy. And so a lot of, if you're appreciating what I'm teaching in terms of the sermon material, a lot of that content came from Kelly. And so her work with Tammy. So we're just super thankful for her and just their contribution to all of this. And so she's been such a champ, as I shared the vision and said, hey, we want to do this. And, it's not like she didn't already have responsibilities. So thank you.
Boom. Speaking of Tammy Brown, we got a little treat for our YouTube viewers. T Breezy is hanging out in the background. So enjoy that. Okay, Matt Albee, you want to introduce yourself to us? You're just a friend of the fam, friend of the show.
Yeah, long-time Sandalite, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Boom. You guys might know Matt Albee if you've been around Sandals Church for a while, maybe at Christmas time. He was this tall guy in a Santa suit in all of our Christmas videos.
Yes,
in Good Friday, you were in a security guard arresting Jesus, also the tall guy in the suit.
I was.
So many of you have maybe seen Matt Albee, and you just
so let me throw Matt under the bus real quick. So here's one of my I have many favorite Matt Albee stories. But one time we were in Hawaii, and so especially this one particular area where I like to swim is really sharky. So I pay for a kayak.
The swim is really sharky?
I pay for a kayak, yes. I pay for a kayak for Matt Albee to swim next to me. So, to paddle next to me while I swim. I'm going to swim a couple miles out on the ocean. And his sole job, he has one job, is to keep me in eyesight. And if there's a shark, I got to jump up on the kayak. And so I'm out in the middle of the ocean. And, I'm focused on swimming and I'm not looking up. And so I just stop and I think, where is Matt Albee? And I look up and he's like a mile away, 7 and out on his kayak, staring at this island that they've created. It's like a fake island. And he's just over there having all kinds of joy. And I'm like, man, I picked the wrong dude to kayak with me because I literally could be eaten and he wouldn't even know where I was. So
I took my mission as keeping you safe. And so mission accomplished.
To do that, you need to be close to the person who's swimming in the open ocean.
Is it possible for an island to be fake if it is in actuality out there in the middle of the water?
What was it? It was like
it was a floating bar.
But it had trees and stuff on it.
Big.
Oh.
I didn't see it. I did not see it as close as Mr. Albee did. So he could tell us what it was actually.
How much the drinks cost.
From my vantage point, I think isn't it like a place where like on a wave runner you can go out and have drinks and stuff? Yeah. I don't know. I was swimming. So,
I was going to say 7 is my second highest score on the Enneagram. I have a 92, and I can now testify. If you just say the phrase floating bar, and whatever little Enneagram inside me like pops up like a little prairie dog. What? Oh, that sounds so
here's
fun.
The thing is, it was closed, but it still drew Matt in its direction.
Okay, so we are talking about the Enneagram style of 7, the enthusiast. Pastor Matt, you want to tell us about the 7, a little bit of an overview before we jump in?
Yeah, so the enthusiast on many things, and Kelly can jump in here. It's called the joyful person, the enthusiast. What are some other names that they use to describe?
The adventurer.
The adventurer, the adventurous person. So it's just that part of humanity that wants to just experience life for all that it is, and that's its beauty, right? They're going to squeeze absolutely every drop out of life before they die, and if it's a little sooner than everybody else, that's okay as long as they had a good time. So that's what they want to do. If they're going to go out, they're going to go out with a bang. They're just beautiful, wonderful, amazing, fun people. They bring joy to things. They can make anything fun. If you're a bunch of 5s, invite a 7 to your party. It'll liven it up. So, they're just going to have a good time. Matt will show up in his Santa Claus suit, which, he's already 6'7", body of Greek god, obviously stands out. But in a Santa suit, draws a little attention, and he loves that. So, that's who they are. So they live to just enjoy life, and that's the beauty. The brokenness of them is that they can pursue pleasure and avoid pain at all costs. So things that hurt, things that that are painful, and that can be all kinds of things. And but unfortunately, life is difficult. Matt lost his dad just a couple of years ago, and I've walked through that with him, and that's been, wouldn't you say, the hardest thing of your life?
By far.
Yeah, by far. And I bet your dad was a 7 too.
I think so.
Yeah, Matt's dad was just this hilariously fun guy. I remember at his funeral, I said, "Who are we talking about here?" Because this guy was a nutcase, man. He was just a lot of fun, and just would mess with me all the time. And so, which, I like to mess with Matt. So just really fun people. But there are painful things in life. And, if you are a 7, pain is meant to be felt. And so that's one of I think the tragedies of our modern culture is we assume that all pain is bad. And so we numb ourselves. And so, man, the doctors do that. I can't tell you how many times somebody will go through a death or a crisis, and the first thing the doctor is doing is prescribing a drug that numbs, which doesn't allow you to feel. And if you can't feel, you can't heal. So that's
oh, hello.
That's a horrible thing. A strategy. And I think that it's just so important. A great verse for 7s is Psalms 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me. And the key word for a 7 is through. This is temporary. It will not last. It's going to be difficult, but God is going to get you through it, and he is with you. And right, the beauty of that is you anoint my head with oil in the presence of my enemies, and surely I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. David, a 7, wrote that. And so I think that's a fantastic psalm just to remind us of the beauty. So the beauty is joyful, enthusiast, just an exciting person. That's one of the things, Matt and I have been friends for a long time. I love being with him is because it's always going to be a good time no matter what we're doing. We have a good time and we enjoy ourselves, and he's just kind of a nut, and I love that about him. And the same thing with Kelly. Kelly brings just life to so much of what we do at Sandals Church. I actually met Kelly when my first daughter was going to CBU, and there's a lot of boring meetings that you have to sit through, and it's just really not exciting. You're writing all this money. You're not right. You're writing a check for all this money. You're for us, it was our first kid going away. It's very sad. And then here's this bright light, Kelly, up on stage, who just brought joy and made me feel very peaceful about what was going to happen for my kid, and remember my mind be, okay, college is a positive experience. And I said, we got to hire this gal. And then I found out she went to our church, which was, man, that's great. So anyways, we stole her from CBU, and we're very grateful for that. And they're wonderful. So you want to add anything to the 7 that maybe I missed? So sorry, I just sprung that on you.
I think some of what will come out is the resiliency that comes from positivity. And I think that's an important thing that gets overlooked, and the depth that can be present in a 7, which is what I think Matt and I would both say we're concerned about, is that people wouldn't see us to be authentic or to have depth because they're seen as flighty and fun, and which is great, but there's more to us than just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We actually have some questions on that specifically we'll get to in a minute. Let me ask you guys this. As you kind of explored Enneagram and learned about the different styles and types, maybe we'll start with you, Kelly, since you've been a part of the Enneagram process and rollout here at Sandals Church. What did you learn about yourself, or was anything surprising to you? Just when you said, okay, I'm identifying as a 7, what was that like for you?
Initially, it was a feeling of, well, okay, that's a given. But I was mildly disappointed because I thought, what's the value? Like, how important is this? Like, oh, I can make people happier. I can make people smile. Like, I can't take over countries, and I can't, all these others that have these huge strengths. And to say, oh, well, you're lighthearted. Oh, that's great, And so I was a little disappointed initially with what it revealed in me. Some of the insecurity I already had came out through that, but it's given me steps toward transformation, which I didn't have before.
Yeah, so let me interject there. So, I think a lot of us, we assume that our number, we can't be a leader. And that's one of the things I've been trying to do is pick out leaders in the Bible from each number. And so David is the 7, and David is a fantastic leader. And so one of the things that 7s can do when they're healthy is, here's how their positivity and joy is they can inspire others to a vision and help drive them along in a positive way. 7s can make things happen, and they actually make great leaders. They're great leaders because they're visionary. They see things that maybe somebody else can't see. And so, I have some 7 in me, and Matt has some 3 as well. Do you have 3? So here's where the 7 is uniquely different from the 3. Is the 3 sole purpose is, okay, this is going to make me successful. The 7 says this is going to bring joy to the world and make it better. And so let's do this. Let's make this happen. And so that's the wonder of, if you have a 7 that you work with, or you're married to a 7, is they see the end goal and they drive the family, the business, your small group to something better or greater because it's good. And, we talked about in the sermon, Psalm 16:11, in the presence of the Lord is pleasure forevermore. That part of, for the 7 is, and that's how God is reflected, is in the end, man, it's a good time. It's a great time. I mean, there's a reason Jesus describes heaven as the great banquet, the great party, the great celebration. And he's speaking that into a culture. We all get invited, well, probably not 7s, but most of the other numbers get invited to parties they don't want to go to. But in the ancient world, you didn't go to a party. You didn't get celebrated. That was something uniquely reserved for the rich and the famous. And so Jesus is saying, everybody's invited to this party, and I'm going to throw it for you. And you're all going to eat. You're all going to feast. And remember, he's speaking that to the vast majority of people who starved on a regular basis. That is not even a concept in our modern world. Obesity is the challenge of the world now, whereas starvation was the challenge for most of human history. So he's saying you're going to be taken care of. Your needs are going to be met. It's going to be amazing. And so that's what the 7 needs to remind themselves, is in the presence of God is joy forevermore. Otherwise, they can be like Pinocchio and they run from the father, become an ass, and are sold into slavery because of their passions. And right, that's the ancient truth of that old story. And so they run from that. And right, you run from your conscience, the little cricket, Jiminy Cricket. That's the implanted of what's right and wrong in your mind. And nope, I'm going to run from that, and then ultimately swallowed. And and that's a symbol of death. I mean, it's an incredible story of a symbol of death, and he comes back to life like Jonah, and then runs to the Father, and then becomes real after he's experienced sorrow. So that's enough on that. I want to write a book on that. I haven't figured out what I want to call it, but just like, truths from old fairy tales that we need today, or something like that. But because people don't read them anymore. So,
can you guys talk about just how you've experienced the unhealthy side of being a 7, maybe challenging in relationships, at work, or anything like that? What's that look like for you guys?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is definitely a part of it. And I think it's because my initial response is to back away from real conversation, and maybe a painful conversation. I think through maturity and through growing up, I've learned to deal with that. Like most people probably have had to do with their number type, or with their go-to number that they identify with most. A lot of that has been through relationship. So again, here's another shout out for community groups, but being in relationship with people, especially a lot of people in the group who do it very naturally, and learning from them and seeing the value of that was meaningful to me. So, to a 7, if you're not in community and dealing with people that identify with the other numbers more easily than you do, that would be really valuable, because I think I saw the question on one of the Instagram, but it was like, how do I get a person to identify with their pain? And a 7 initially isn't even going to know what that means.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, my initial thing is like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because I would never do that. And then I think about it, and I can do that. I can fight through that, but it's not my initial reaction. I have to try, I have to kind of go there.
All right.
So, yeah.
I think for the brokenness, Pastor Matt, even I was going through something recently, or in the last year, and you literally texted me and said, "Stay in the pain." And I thought, oh, it's a terrible text. But we are gifted to be able to get to a silver lining. And how I think of it is, there's a gray cloud, and no matter what the gray cloud, we can find that silver lining. But if we push through it too fast, we miss the growth that happens. And so we, instead of dealing with the pain, I just want to get to the happy ending, or what's the upside of it. And I skip all the growth. And the big times that I've grown the most in life have been through challenging situations, through my hardest times, through losing my dad when I was 20 and having to face that. I think that's why I'm now able to have more depth of conversation and be in people's pain a little bit more, is because I dealt with so much of it through that experience.
Yeah, and I think sevens are great at being there for others in their pain. It's feeling their own that's the challenge. So oftentimes they're great ministers to you when you're in your pain, but them resonating with their own. And so that's what makes our modern day society so challenging, is avenues to escape pain that were not available to most human beings throughout history are now accessible with a click, with a, literally whatever you want, you can bring it into your house and bring it into your life. And, pleasure is a great numbing tool for pain. So temporarily feeling better. So that can be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be sex, it can be porn, it can be all kinds of things. And so if you're a 7, you've got to learn to, like Matt said, surround yourself with community and stay in the moment. So, the challenge for a 7 is, lifelong deep relationships. And so a 7 can have a lot of great, because they're typically great with people, great with relationships, fun to be around. And so they'll be a mile wide, but an inch deep. And so we talked about, I love this verse that we picked in this sermon. Jonathan made David. It's so important. He made David swear again an oath of loyalty. So Jonathan is loyal, but he's like, David, right? I need you again to recommit your friendship to me. And David learned a great deal from Jonathan through a lifelong relationship, ultimately ended untimely in Jonathan's death. But, it's over time. Matt and I have been able to have conversations because we've been in a relationship for 20 years, difficult conversations, both ways, me to him and him to me. But that doesn't happen if you run from relationship. You have to stick in the relationship. And the same thing happens in marriage. It can happen in a job. A 7 can assume, okay, this job isn't fun anymore. I got to go somewhere else. And so they jump from job to job, career to career. And then ultimately, in the end, that brings more financial suffering, all kinds of pain in the end, because they didn't stay in the moment and work through difficult things. And so, if you're a 7 and you're young, work is work. It's not called fun. Yeah. And so Matt and I have talked, at length about that. Matt has to do a lot of unfun things because he provides for his family and he's putting kids through college. He doesn't, like doing a lot of what he has to do, but he does it because he likes and enjoys providing for his family. And so that's what the 7 has to do. Is, I don't want to say you have to trick yourself, but you have to find the fun in what you don't enjoy and figure that out. And, I just had to text an employee this week who actually told me, sandals doesn't feel like fun. It feels like work. And I responded, well, it is work, right?
Surprise.
And that's okay. And so part of what we do is working through our feelings and staying in that. And so if you have 7, you're going to get bored really quickly. And it's, what's my purpose? And you got to be careful, that screensaver on your computer of an island that you just want to run away and get to can really, really rob you of the joy of where you are. And so 7 is my second highest score. And my wife and I used to joke about my porn, and you remember what it was. Tammy would come home from work and she'd say, how long have you spent on porn today? And what she meant was I would look at, and Matt's laughing, for hours I would look at real estate in Hawaii, right? I can't afford it. I don't have a job there. And I'm literally clicking house to house to house. Really?
It's 10 feet under lava.
Yeah.
All those houses.
Yeah, Matt,
literally
so you're right.
in that
So
neighborhood.
Matt says, hey, weren't you looking at property in Puna? And I'm like, yeah. So can imagine if I would have moved my whole family there and we're under 100 feet of lava. So that would have been a great move. And here's the thing is I was telling you before the show started, there was a time in my life where I swore that one day inevitably I would live in Hawaii. I don't have those feelings anymore. How I felt in my 30s is not how I feel in my 40s. And so I've learned there's more out there to enjoy. And so just know that, running from pain can actually cause more pain. And so don't be afraid to sit in the moment, especially if you're a parent and you're a 7, have those tough conversations. Had David sat his boys down in the Bible and had a conversation, I think life would have turned out very differently. But he ran from the conflict in his home. He tries to cover up things, right? And so, man, it just screws things up. Instead of, telling Uriah, hey, I slept with your wife. Sorry, bro, my bad. He gets Uriah killed, but God knows the truth. And ultimately, what does that keep David from? Being able to build the temple. The one thing. So the man after God's own heart doesn't get to build the house in which God will dwell with his people. And that's just sad. So it ultimately keeps him from doing what he always wanted to do. And so don't be afraid to run from pain. Nobody likes pain. Anybody that tells you they like pain, there's something weird about that person, right? There's something weird. So what you have to keep in mind is the end goal. Here's the goal. Here's what I'm striving for. Here's what I'm longing for. And if you hang in there, you can do it. And marriages can get better. You can find meaning in your job, whatever you do. You can find joy in the mundane things. I don't think any mom of kids under 5 enjoys a lot of what they do.
Amen.
I was literally at the grocery store, and I was getting some meat, and this kid's like, look at this, look at this, look at that, look at this, look at, and I go, oh my gosh, look at the joy this kid has just looking at different cuts of meat. And the mom starts crying, and she's like, I needed to hear that because I do not like him right now. And she's just, because this kid's exuberance is overwhelming to her and it's unending. And, I think she kind of had that look on her face like, someone please kidnap my kid. She's just like, this kid is just, ADHD all over the place. Your face up against the meat counter, which is just gross.
That's how I do it at the butcher shop.
Yeah. So, you just got to be really, really careful and hang in there and just know God can change your heart. He can change your situation, but God likes to change the situation you're in. He doesn't like to change you by changing the situation. And that's what most of us pray. God, change my circumstance, when God wants to change our heart. And that's, for the 7, that's just really, really hard is I'm in this circumstance for God to teach me something and for me to learn something. And you can learn anything in any situation. I think that's important. And so I'm so grateful that I have enough morality in me that I didn't run from some dumb stuff. And then of course God, had me marry a 6 who is loyal and true and, is really an anchor to a lot of my flightiness. But pain hurts. But what hurts more than entering into pain is running from it.
So we have a bunch of questions that have come in from people who've identified with a lot of the 7 styling through the self-discovery tests. So this first one comes in from a Justin, not me, another one. Since the self-discovery series has launched, I felt that being a high 7 has put me in a category as, quote, loud, crazy, and wild. Does that identify with you guys? You guys are being so like quiet and yeah, exactly. You guys
you really are.
You guys are doing great. Okay. Right now. I believe these attributes are part of who I am, but I'm also so much more than that. What can I do as someone with a high 7 to be taken more seriously, or to be seen as someone who has more value to offer to Sandals Church, but at the same time to be true to who God has designed me to be?
Matt's going to go for this.
All right, Matt Albee, Pastor Matt is pointing at you.
I've heard this whining for a decade. Go ahead.
So,
get your face right in that microphone.
Talk into the microphone.
I got it. Okay. The initial reaction is that his description of a 7, and I didn't find it so offensive. Well, one, I think we need to remember that in the Bible, the number for perfection and completeness is 7.
Oh,
there you go.
And,
this is true.
and I really took that to heart, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
I didn't know we were going there.
So that being said, there is some baggage that comes along with it, but I think like baggage that comes along with every number, and that's sort of the vulnerable part of taking part in this whole process is that you are going to be identified slightly, at least by your go-to number, and I would encourage people to embrace that only because it makes them more healthy about, when they fully understand who they are. I do get the impression, correct me if you're wrong, but it seems to be, this is going to sound weird, but the most enviable number. Like what I hear from a lot of people when they find out I'm a 7 primarily is that, oh, I wanted to be a 7. You hear that a lot, or I wish I had more 7, or I was disappointed in my 7 score.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know what to think about that. I feel maybe a little bad about it, only because I don't want them to feel bad or about that. So
sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I think the core sin is so important to balance that out, because I don't think anybody's excited about gluttony.
Right.
So
you don't have to look at me when you say gluttony.
Yeah.
There are 2 actual 7s on the other side of the table.
You actually got laser focused on that.
They're not, y'all aren't fat, but you got other issues I know about. So,
And so he said he was a little. What did he say?
A little bit disappointed, I think you said.
Well, I think and here's what I'd say is if you don't have any shame or discomfort about your number, you probably didn't find it. Once you find your number, you're going to be drawn instantly because we're broken to your brokenness. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not like, ooh, I don't want to share this, then, it hasn't hit you. One gal at our Woodcrest campus, when I was there live a couple weeks ago, she came up to me and she was like, and I wouldn't have guessed that she was a 7. So I have not experienced her like I've experienced you guys, super outgoing, super loud. I would not, she just doesn't come across that way. And again, that's what makes, the Enneagram so different from like Myers-Briggs is it's, you can be an introvert or extrovert and be there's lots of variables within each number, but she said, I'm a 7, please be gentle. Like she's like, please be gentle in your sermon on the 7s because she feels exposed. And so when you get to the place where I'm talking about your number and you feel exposed and you're nervous, that's when ding, 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 we hit it. Yeah. And you're a little like, because we're all a little worried. Just like, I don't want people to know that my core sin is lying. That does not feel good. No. Deceit, yay, team deceit. No one wants to be slithering, unless something's wrong with you. Sorry, Harry Potter reference.
Slytherin, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Slytherin, yeah.
So, Kelly, I felt like you were actually talking about this a little bit earlier. The heart of this question is about how do I be taken more seriously?
Right. Well, and I have a good example of when this really did harm for me.
Okay.
It's mildly funny, but it's when I was in labor. Gentlemen.
Whoa.
So I
almost did a spit
pulled the
take.
labor card. Pulled the labor card. Who here's had a baby?
Winning.
The story sounds so funny already.
But I went to the counter, and our thing, I was in a lot of pain, physical pain.
Yeah.
And so I get there, and my thing was to lighten the mood in between pain.
Lord.
So I'm trying, I'm like in a lot of pain, and then in between, I'm like, so how are you guys? What are you up to? Trying to make light. So as a result, they didn't believe me that I was in labor. And I was 2 minutes apart, like I was there. And so they put me in a check-in room, right? They didn't even put me in a real deal room. They put me in a check-in. They said, you'll probably be going home. And I'm like, guys, I'm serious. I'm in pain. But I'm making light in between. And they didn't check me for 20 minutes. And by that time, no hope of an epidural. Hello, avoiding pain.
Yes.
So I had to fight right through and had a kid within an hour and a half.
Wow.
But I realized from that the next time I was like, no jokes, Kelly. You got to go in there and really build on this pain. And that was a personal example. But in life, trying to figure out, in a meeting, say I'm in a really boring meeting, if we had those, hypothetically, if there was a boring meeting. Yeah, come on. And so if I'm in it, my nature is, how can we add a little energy, a little life, which has a good side because it keeps people awake, which is a win. But then trying to balance that with people knowing that what I have to say is worth listening to. I've told you before, I was valedictorian in high school. Like I'm not stupid. I've got some knowledge.
I don't know if you know this, but I was not valedictorian.
But I think
close.
It's probably that I could just take tests well. But
I was 424 off.
To feel like people did
out of 425.
Exactly. But to feel like people don't take you seriously because you can lighten a mood, trying to find that balance, I think.
Okay, let me press in real quick, and then you go.
We got a 4.
Everybody wants to jump in.
Don't you feel like 7s can also use humor to divert from seriousness? Okay, all right.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
You
Go
first,
ahead.
honored guest, Matt Albee.
Thank you, sir.
Oh.
Go ahead, fun guy.
I had a follow-up question. So you're in the moment, you're in labor, and you're telling jokes. What, was that motivated by helping the other people in the room or helping you? Totally.
I thought I was making them, I thought it was awkward for them that I was in so much pain.
To have to do their job.
I was trying to talk to the people around me, the people with me.
Yeah, I think it's important. If you identify with 7, you're going to be able to identify with the fact that you feel a sort of social responsibility to lighten the situation.
Yeah.
And I feel like at sometimes I'm like failing if I'm not carrying what I feel is the weight of, my side of the levity of the party, the conversation, the meeting. And if it's been a couple minutes since I've told a joke, I got to throw something out there. So, or feel that I'll feel like I need to. And again, this process, and we've been on a long journey of self-discovery through not only the Enneagram, but other tools that I've done with the Browns and my community group. But that have shown me how to identify that, fight through that, maybe not do that again because it's not always appropriate, but I think it's a something that sevens feel.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Well, one thing I want to say, Kelly, I always use you as an example, right? So we're colleagues. We're talking about being taken seriously. I do a lot of training for like hosting and being in front of people here at staff, and I frequently use you as an example because we're sometimes in boring meetings together. And one of the things I think that you do is really great is you always get up and you stand up and you when you're talking, which basically is to me it's a signal to everyone else in the room, I am taking this moment seriously right now. Whereas other people, it'll just come to them and they'll kind of throw their part out, do their contributions. But when there are times of meetings that you're responsible for, you stand up and own that. And I think that's actually really, really great. And it's a signal, hey, I'm taking this seriously. And it helps other people grab in. And also, you can be fun and silly in that moment. But also, just because you're standing and all those other kinds of things is really, really helpful to say, oh, she's still in charge. So I don't know. Anyways, I frequently use you as a good example of somebody who goes above and beyond what you would just have to do in a normal moment to really own a piece of thing that you're responsible for. So and that's one. Just stand up more, maybe, I guess is what I'm saying to all the other sevens. Stand up in your life and just have conversations standing. I don't know if that's helpful.
How have you guys, because you're both in leadership positions at work, how have you guys, when motivation, joy, and fun is not working to lead, how do you shift into the difficult conversations? Because I know you've had to have them at work. How do you do that? Because for some people, it can be a little unsettling when the fun guy, gal, is now saying, hey, get your crap done. Because, right, sometimes you have to sometimes people aren't motivated by your enthusiasm. Yeah. Right? So how do you do that? Because that can be hard for a seven.
Yeah. And I think it comes off super unexpected for the person because they sit down and they're used to you encouraging them. We love to motivate and inspire and build them up. And so having to have a conversation that feels like the opposite of that, I feel like I have to preface it. Like, this is going to be a different kind of meeting because otherwise you take them out at the knees and they don't even see it coming because most of mine, they don't know it's coming because I don't dwell on it. Right. We don't dwell on the pain. So I'm not every time I see you thinking about this area we need to talk about. I just see you, I can compartmentalize and I'm like, oh, it's good to see you. I can act like things are fine. And then when we get in the moment, that's when I address it. But if we don't prep them in some way, it really throws them off their game.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think you can see the shock sometimes when you've prepped yourself and you're really serious about whatever it is that you have to say, but that other person knows you as the light, funny person. It can be shocking. So just being aware of that and how you deal with people.
Here's a question I think you guys are just going to love. This comes from Jennifer. How can the seven learn to deal with, process, and sit in pain instead of running away from it?
I have one thing that I thought was great. A couple years ago, that movie came out, Inside Out, and it was really about a seven. It was about a seven. People haven't seen it. It's that cartoon, and the main cartoon emotion was joy. And then she kept trying to put sorrow in her circle. In fact, in one point in the movie, she actually paints a circle and keeps her in there. I really resonated with that, and I thought they did a brilliant job of talking about, at least from the seven's perspective, the give and take or the conflict that the joy in us feels initially, and then by the end of the movie, she's learning that sorrow has its place, and to be healthy, you got to let sorrow come in too. And so I think that answered the question. Or it's just an analogy that I've used that I thought was helpful for me.
So we have a seven who's pointed to a cartoon.
Hey, I'm tracking with it. I love that movie.
Made sense to me. Yeah. So I think having to remind myself the ultimate joy that comes from working through the hard things. I still have to relate it to joy in some way. Because otherwise it's hard to get motivated to push through. But if I can figure out what the long-term joy would be, like hard stuff in marriage, thinking through what it could look like later on and the joy that could come, the hope of redemption, because we have a lot of hope in us. And so the hope and the ideal still being an option out there, helps me to trudge through. But it's a constant reminder. I think like I can forget so fast. So I have to say like, oh wait, I was going to stay in this pain. Like I wasn't going to avoid it. I was going to stay in because of this. But if I lose sight of that long-term joy, or I can't see it, I think once you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel or what you're aiming for, depression can happen. And depression when you are a strong 7 is so hard and so damaging because it's against our whole self is about pulling people out of hard things and trying to see the positive. And if we get to a spot where we can't see the positive,
There's just no escape.
That's
It feels
a dark
like
hole.
you're no escape. Yep.
Ooh.
So you guys,
Right. Okay. So what Matt just said. So the fear of the 7 is being trapped, and so that's the fear of pain is that I'm stuck in this and I can't get out. And so so that's the enemy lying because we can all get out over time, and we're not trapped in that. So the 7 desires to be free. So it's free to experience, free to live, free to have fun. So like work is not freeing. Family responsibilities are not freeing. Sometimes church cannot feel freeing. Serving, right? So let's just call it adulthood. Because I'm watching we were both in the same boat. Matt and I were watching our children engage in adulting, and it's not easy for them. But we're trying to coach them in that. But sometimes we have to coach ourselves and say, okay, I'm going to stay in this. And I think that's why a lot of people struggle with marriage, especially if you're 7. Right, dating is fun. Yeah. Right, the anticipation of sexual intimacy. Although most people nowadays start sleeping together before they get married, but the anticipation of and even the joy of a wedding, like the joy of this big celebration and this big party, and then all of a sudden, you're doing the work of life, taking care of the kids, getting jobs, right? The dishes have to be done, the house has to be clean. Like these things are real things, and so they're joy suckers. If you're not careful, and so you just have to remind yourself of what the end goal is and where your heart is. So. Anyways.
I was going to say, you guys both have mentioned dealing with the loss of your father as being a growing moment of pain for you. How did you sit with your pain or, own it, accept it, and not run in those moments and grow?
I'm 2 years. It will be in June, and so it's still very present.
Well, your dad died suddenly, and it was unexpected.
Yeah,
it was like shock.
Yeah. And so I actually can say that for the first year and a half, there was no escaping it. Even it was, I'm getting a little emotional too.
That's fine. Your dad was awesome.
Yeah. So I see some light in that now. For the last 6 months, I can feel like I'm sort of out of that darkness. But it was hard, and and because there was no escape, it was even more tough because it was too big to get around. I mean, I could distract myself, and that's the tough part about I will say to 7s, or if you love a 7, just allowing them to be distracted at times because they need it to feel like themselves, but just being careful too because it can be damaging. What they choose to distract themselves can be damaging. So there's something to be careful. If you are 7 or love a 7, just keep an eye on that.
Yeah. And I was really young. I was 20, so that was 20 years ago.
Had you done any traveling before your dad died?
No, it's what inspired the
Okay, that's what
traveling.
I was curious.
But just like you, the reason it was so impacting is that it was one of the few things I couldn't figure out how to escape the pain. It was one of the few moments of pain that I was like, nothing can escape this. And it's in college, which is supposed to be like this great time of your life. And for me, I look back and I don't recall laughing for like a year, which is close to death for a 7. So that was a really low point. It was also the time when I understood the Lord the best. And that's why I'm so thankful for that, is that I had to depend on him through that time. And I had other people coming and saying, how did you get through that? And it gave me that pain gave me an opportunity and has changed the course of my life. It's why I went into overseas missions, not just to escape. That was to really use my life for good and another way of getting the most out of life. But
yeah. So part of the liberal criticism of the Christian God is that what God that is love would require his son to die. So that's one of the big criticisms when you get into kind of a philosophical criticism of the God that we believe is good. And I think that the reason is that death is a unique pain. It's a unique pain that for God to relate to us, which is the whole purpose of Jesus coming. We were made for relationship. We are broken from relationship by sin. And for him to restore that, part of what God did is he entered into death. The permanence of death, the realness of death. It was very, very real. It broke literally the body of Jesus and the heart of God.
Right.
And, you say, well, he was only gone for 3 days. Well, time only exists in our consciousness. It does not exist in the consciousness of God. It's something that he created, right? He exists outside of time. He created time so that we could exist. And so, God experienced an eternity of separation in those moments because of where he is, as opposed to where we are. And so, so just know that we worship a God who enters into our pain, knows our pain, loves us in our pain. And, one of my favorite stories is when Lazarus dies. Jesus cries at the funeral, and he knows he's going to raise him from the dead. And so why on earth does Jesus enter into the emotion of pain and suffering when he knows it's going to be fixed momentarily? And the answer is because he's perfect. And that's what a perfect God does. A perfect God doesn't just enter into our joy, but he enters into our very real pain and our very real brokenness. And that's why, again, for all of you out there who don't share Christ, you have no idea what your Hindu friends are missing out on. You have no idea what your Muslim friends are missing out on. You have no idea what, your atheist friends are missing out on it because you take it for granted every single day. You take it for granted every single day that God loves you, God hears you, God knows you, and he enters into your pain. And that's just tragic. That's the great sin of the modern church is we just take it for granted and we assume that everybody else knows that, and they just don't.
So let's talk about the core sin of gluttony for the 7, right? All 4 of us at this table score 7s in the 90s or above, but I'm the only fat one. So what does gluttony look like in y'all's life?
Mine was overindulgence of life experience. I had a time where my motto was anything for a good story. So I'll do anything. It was initially try everything once, and then I had to get right with God that's not a good motto. Try everything once, not good.
Yeah, no.
But
No.
anything.
Hey, can you and I have an
story.
HR meeting after this? Okay.
Oh, rubbish.
Yeah.
Oh no. So
been a good
mine had a lot to do with it feeds into the escapism of social involvement, engagement, staying busy. I can never have too much going on. I look back even at my calendars that I kept when I was in junior high and high school, and I wrote down oh, I'm going over to this person's house, but it was never just one. I was going over to this person's house, and then I'm going to go to dessert here, and it was how much can I pack in a day? Right. I don't know what I was escaping from, but I was just trying to suck all of life, and so I also love food, but mine doesn't come out the same.
Yeah, the party never stops. For the unhealthy 7, it never ever stops, which means there's going to be a crash. So it never ever stops. So especially if you have a teenager that's a 7, good luck with that, because they don't have the last part of your brain that develops is decision making at the front and impulse control, and so the 7 is just pedal to the metal. They have no what if, what could go wrong. Their fear is missing out. Boom, I'm going for it. I'm all in, and that's really really hard. So
Kelly, your gluttony is kind of comes in the form of relational activity, something like that.
Experiences, adventure,
pushing
social.
into excess. Okay.
Well, and think about how losing your dad at such a young age totally reinforced with you life is quick, right?
Oh, wow.
So you take Kelly, who's a 7. So you think about her adaptive nature, which is not. It's the way that we adapt to our fallen world. So her dad dies at 20, which is okay, now I got to drink Monsters or what, rock stars or what, right? Because that's the man. Life is precious. Your dad died at what? He was what, 40?
55.
55. So that's just a reminder that, okay, I only have so much time to experience all of these things. And, and so experience is different from meaning. And so the 7 has to pursue meaning. And so let meaning be, the joy of your life rather than the experience. And so, like for the 7, sex is fun, but sex outside the context of marriage does not produce meaning. So intimacy produces meaning, and intimacy requires commitment, connection, and time, and safety, and all of those things. And so you have to do that. It's okay to enjoy a drink or enjoy something, but intoxication, right, can cause you to do things that temporarily maybe remove pain, but then can throw yourself in a situation, where you're really, really broken. I got to be careful how I share this. I can't share that story because they go to our church, but somebody was just drinking and that led to an impulse. And so 7s often can be impulsive, and they ended up doing something with a friend. And then they're both like, what the heck just happened? And then they had to share that with their spouses. And it's just bad. It's bad. It's bad, 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 bad. And right. And forever, there's just not, it's gonna affect their friendships in a negative way because they overindulged in alcohol and they were inebriated and they did something that I don't think they would have done had they been in their right mind. So,
Right.
How does gluttony play out for you, Matt Albee? It's obviously not about food.
So, it's just about pursuing pleasure. So whatever that is, it can be food. It can be food. Jeep life is near and dear to me now. Video games, or just anything that it becomes an unhealthy pursuit, other than you doing something constructive or spending time with your family or working on your relationship with God or the people close to you. It just whatever is pleasing in excess. Yeah.
Okay, this is perfect for Michelle's question.
Well, hold on, let's go back. You didn't ask me. So how does my gluttony work? And so here's why I'm not fat. Because my gluttony and my 3 converge in an unhealthy manner. So I'm way too image conscious to eat things. So I become gluttonous with exercise. That's where I indulge, and it becomes unhealthy. So, right? So, that addictive personality that more is better. So if running a 5K is great, why not a 10K? Why not a marathon? Why not an Ironman? It's more. And it just literally gets out of control, and it's a real battle. And I'll have to tell my wife, I feel my mind getting out of control. Like I feel like it spirals. I'm only going to do one Ironman, and then I'm all done. Then I'm going to win an Ironman, and then I'm going to win my age group, and then I'm going to and it just starts going that way. And so that's where the image consciousness of the 3 and the gluttonous of the 7 come together. Is I'm not going to do something. And so it's why I struggle with pornography as opposed to having sex with women when I was growing up, because having actual sex affected my image, but nobody knew what I was doing with porn. Yeah. That was private for me. So I could have an escape to porn, but it didn't tarnish my image because I'm the only one that knew.
Yeah.
So, right. So that's why you guys need to know your numbers. And again, Sandel's test is the best because those things work so well together rather than all the dumb arrows that point. That might be you, but man, it's not me. And you need to learn yourself. So I become indulgent in exercise. And just so you know, exercise can produce chemical reactions in your body that are similar to other things. They're called endorphins. There is a high for some people. And it's weird. When you become at an elite level of fitness, there's a feeling that you get that you only get at that level, and then when you slip, it's gone. And so it's a feeling of invincibility. It's a feeling of I can do all things. Who needs Christ? Philippians 4:13 out the window. So it's really, really unhealthy. And so and a lot of people in our church, overindulge in exercise, and it's just right. So whatever the escape is, and exercise can be an escape. It can be. It's good in moderation. It's unhealthy in excess. And so that's the thing is, as a 7, you can become excessive at anything, absolutely anything. I mean, your thing could be Bible conferences or Christian conferences, and you're going to go to every one, and you're going to be. I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
It's unending what's addictive. And so we fool ourselves because exercise is good, or church is good, or church conferences are good, or, and you just lose it. I mean, you're not going to go to Coachella. You're going to follow the band all over the world, right? And people literally do that. I mean, it's like, I'm going to be done for a year and I'm going to check out on life. So, I was with my parents yesterday, and our server, I was just talking with him. I don't know why. I mean, I talk to everyone. But he quit his job, quit everything he had in New York City, and rode his bicycle to California. I was like, whoa, well, okay, probably a 7.
Well, yeah.
Probably a 7, and, I'm just going to do it. What could go wrong? Well, so.
Okay, so Michelle asks, she says, I enjoy any new experience that comes my way. Sounds familiar. I love to fill my calendar up with all the things I love or feel I need to be doing, but I always end up struggling with committing to that one-on-one quiet time with God. What are some recommendations you would give to a 7 that might struggle with committing to daily time with God and growing in my relationship with him?
Yeah, if I could show you, I'm going to say if I could show you my journals. I really don't have journals. I have sporadic entries in books that people call journals. For my whole life. And
on the outside, it says journal.
Yeah. And in almost everyone, up until about 10 years ago, it was daily quiet time. And it's just because I was undisciplined. And so I think the older you get, here's the lie that kids believe. One day when I'm old, I'll do what I want. That's a lie.
Yeah.
You never get to do what you want. And if you do, that destroys your life. So, people who get to do whatever they want are pretty tweaked. So, I just realized that I was never going to be who I needed to be. So what's the end? What's the joy? The joy is becoming like Christ, being who God's called me to be. And I've experienced over and over again doing life my way. And I just realized life is better when I'm in God's word and in his hands. So that for me was the motivation. My day's better, my life's better, my marriage is better. Everything's better when I'm in God's word. And so that's how my 7, right, worked that out. My 3 is, in order to be successful, I got to know the Bible. So that's the unhealthy version. But, don't be afraid to understand what motivates you, right? That's the Enneagram, what motivates you, and use those things as leverage to do great things in your life. And so that's what I did. But I get it, man. Because the 7 is distracted by all the fun that I could have. And, cracking open a book doesn't always fall in that category. But that's how it worked for me. How about you guys?
I couldn't agree more. The way you said it is just that, reading the Bible is not, I wouldn't describe that as fun. Mm-hmm. And so it goes against what my first impulse would be. And I'm not great at it. I go through periods of being better at it than others. But when I am in it and routinely in it and, just doing it on a regular basis, everything is better. I mean, just like what you said, I would just, reiterate that perfectly the way you described it.
So Matt and I are a lot alike. So one of the things that I do is I write the date every single time I read the Bible. So right now I'm in Romans 12. So I'll read 12 through 15 today, and I'll write today's date in there. And so
in your Bible or in your journal?
In the Bible. Yeah, I'm not a good journaler.
Oh, okay.
So I write in the Bible. So next time I crack the Bible open, if it's been 5 days, if it's been 4 days, I know because it says it right there.
That's a good
and
way
I
to do it.
see that. And that's just helped be a personal discipline for me because I can't escape that. Because I can say, well, I feel like I read the Bible all the time, but I write in it exactly when I read it. And I don't know. I just started doing that. And I don't know.
Can we ding that for the 7s? Because that's
Sure,
a really great practical, really great
It's way better than
practical
my
tool.
tip.
Well,
I was
because
gonna
my 3,
suggest-
right, I can deceive myself that I've been in the Word. And so
Totally.
when I look at it, I go, oh, it's been 3 days. It's been 4 days. And some of you are like, well, you'll get there. For some of you, it's been 3 months. It's been a year. And you crack that Bible open, you go, wow. And just a healthy reminder, wow, I haven't read, I'm going to preach on a passage out of 1 Kings and 2 Kings next week. I don't know when the last time I read that, but as soon as I open my Bible, I can tell you, oh, I was in this in October of 2017. And so I read through the Bible about every year and a half. I'm not about like the speed of it. I need to get the content. And I just try to just get what God, because my 3, I used to be like 5 chapters a day, and that was just dumb.
Well, that feels like another healthy approach to me as well for a 7, in that you're just saying, I'm just going to plow through this in the order that it presents itself versus what feels good today. Just the consistency of that. Kelly, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, for me, this has been one of the best steps of, we're supposed to pursue sober-mindedness, which I hate that concept, but in pursuing that, one way I do that is knowing that when I spend time in the Word and I read, I feel more grounded during the day, which is what we're supposed to be pursuing. And so what's best for me is to be on a plan. Right now I'm using the Wayfinding Bible, where there's a few different plans that kind of take you through the Bible. And I know what I'm going to read when I get up. I don't have to think or wander because I can get distracted. Like, ooh, this is fun. Instead, I'm going through a set plan. And what's good about that, especially if you're just needing to get back into reading the Bible, is they have one option and it deals a lot with stories, and it helps you take something from those stories. But sevens, we love stories. We love a good story, and the Bible is chock full of them. And so I've actually found it to be a really fun part of my day, unexpected, that I look forward to because I get so much out of that time.
Yeah, so a couple things. I recently have taken up puzzles. So Alzheimer's and dementia runs in my family. So it's a serious issue, and probably something at some point, I'll face, just because genetically it's just a challenge for us. And so at first, puzzles were very frustrating to me because I'm a 7. There's not immediate gratification. I never would have called it fun. But here's the thing I've learned is, Tammy picked, we had a couple easy ones, and then she picked a really, really hard one. And it's really, really frustrating. And I can only do it for about a half hour at a time, finding one piece.
Right.
But here's the thing I noticed is at staring at the puzzle, and at first everything looks the same. And as you've stared at it, literally for days, weeks, and now months, all of a sudden I see nuances that I never saw before. And I go, oh, that's where that piece goes. And that's the way the Bible is. At first, it all feels the same.
Wow.
It doesn't make any sense. But after you look at it for a while and you give yourself time, you're going to see nuances. And so people always ask me this question: how on earth did you get that out of that story? And it's because I've been staring at it for a long time. And I see things, and I start putting the pieces together. And I think God is I don't think God is a genius. God is a genius. And so what he knows is he's written his word in such a way that it's easy for the beginner to go in the shallow end, and it's deep enough for the greatest mind in all of creation to study forever. It's both. And you're going to get out of the Bible whatever amount of time that you put into it. That's just the reality. And seeing how pieces connect and go together. And I just would encourage you, just look at it and ask questions. Get a study Bible. I actually bought that Bible for Tammy, I think 2 Christmases ago. I actually love it. Get the NLT. Anybody that tells you the NLT's, the last thing you want to do is translate the English. I just don't understand. And dumb Christians say things, well, the King James is the only authorized translation. Yeah, authorized by the King of England. We're in America. So read the NLT, read the TNIV, read the newer translations that take English as you understand it and put it into context. And that's just really, really important. If you want to go study the Hebrew and the Greek, fine, go study that. But I got bad news for you. The Hebrew that we study, that's probably not even the Hebrew that Jesus spoke. It's Masoretic Hebrew, 11 to 12, 13th century Hebrew. It's just very, very different. Language changes. Just like we don't speak the language that Shakespeare spoke, right? I mean, even the Jews, language changes over time. Moses, his Hebrew probably looked a lot like Egyptian hieroglyphics. That's the Hebrew that he spoke. So, just to burst your bubble, that's just a reality. It's okay, and God knows, man. People died. They died so you can read the Bible in your language. And William Tyndale, Wycliffe, these guys, they gave their lives. They died horrible deaths so you could read the Bible. And right now as we speak, you can't get a Bible in North Korea. Many parts of China, you can't get them. Today, in Iran, you'll be imprisoned and executed for distributing Bibles. And read it. So,
well, consider my bubble burst. Also, much love to all of our overseas show friends. We do love you.
Yes.
Okay, two last questions. This one comes from Crystal. Throughout my life, I've always been that fun and crazy girl, but now I feel super worn out because people always look to me for a happy time.
Ooh, Albie.
I've also hurt my own self living as a 7 because I'm so into having the best time that I became reckless in my younger years. How do you suggest balance?
You got to retrain the people in your life to see another side of you. You've let your personality run loose too much, and it's fun. It's another analogy. Apparently, I think in analogies a lot, but I think of like my personality as I used to have a German Shorthair Pointer dog that wanted to run.
What's your 5 score?
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
That was very 5.
10. Yeah, I don't know, something. Anyway.
What kind of dog was it again?
German Shorthair Pointer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I hunted a lot, and so this dog did that thing.
Bullet.
And trained it, Bullet. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think of now that I've matured more and I've let the people in my life see the more sober part of my personality, they will accept it more readily. But back to the dog analogy, I can put my personality on a leash and tell it to sit, and it doesn't feel so burdensome because I've developed that. I've trained it to do that when it needs to.
Really good.
But when nothing feels better to a 7 than to reach down and take the leash off and run.
Yeah.
Like, and be with people that you know are safe, that you know will, allow you to say dumb things and great things and whatever, and just run. But when you get older and you have teenage kids and you have a job and a career and whatever, you have to be, train your mind to sit and be okay with that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I think for me, it's a combination both of what other people are expecting, but really I think underneath that question is she likely has that expectation of herself.
Yeah.
We have it of ourselves. We have probably every bit as high as someone else does, that pressure of we need to be the fun person or we need to be out there. And so keeping that in check, and the dissatisfaction that we could find by not being able to be that person all the time, or being at a different stage of life. I think dissatisfaction is one of the things that we haven't really mentioned, but that's a broken side of the 7 is discontent, dissatisfaction. And for me, I lived fun times like exploring and traveling to countries. And sometimes, marriage can be hard. Raising kids that are 6 and 3 feels hard. All these things can feel hard, and it's easy to be unsatisfied. I don't know which one it is.
We'll take it.
Thanks. But what I have to remember is when I was living in South Africa, bungee jumping and skydiving and going on safaris, do you know what I longed for?
Working at Sandals Church.
Yes.
Yes.
I longed for having a husband, for being married, for having kids, for having a house with a garden that I could be at long enough that I could see something grow. So when I feel dissatisfied, and this is going off of her question, but when I feel dissatisfied, I need to look back and think, you know what? I longed for this. And this is a different kind of adventure in this season, but it's still an adventure. And so having to keep perspective that the grass isn't always greener, like as fun as it sounds to be over there, I've been over there doing all those things, and I wanted this. I wanted stability, which is...
So her question was, it sounds like she's experienced some negative stuff from, what was it?
Expectations.
Feeling worn out because people always look to me, so others' expectations, but then also hurt my own self living as a 7 from being reckless, alcohol, etc.
Yeah. So right. I mean, that's the problem is, man, there are very, very real consequences from being impulsive. I just read a statistic that in California, venereal diseases are up 300,000 cases this year. Crazy. And that's because we're impulsive and we're lying. We're lying to our young people. Do whatever you want. It's your body. There's no God. It's a total and absolute lie. Tammy and I were watching news the other night, and the reporter's talking about a shooting somewhere in L.A., and literally he's behind him is a billboard, and it says syphilis is serious. I'm like, that. So it's just know that, man, you can engage in behavior where there are lifelong consequences, and you can't fix it. Yeah. Now, having said that, your life is not over. There's still purpose. There's still a reality. If you go out and get HIV, that's something that's going to limit sexual freedom for the rest of your life, and it's something that you need to be honest with about any future partners, and that may be a chapter in your life that's closed. But that doesn't mean that your life is over. But we can make mistakes that forever change our life, and I think that's the thing is, and both Matt and I are very, very active people. You're active. You're not as old as we are, but we're transitioning from participants to what do you call
Spectators.
it? Spectators.
Yeah.
And that's part of just embracing life as it is. There's going to come a season, especially for people with high 7, where you can no longer do what you once did. And it rapidly starts closing, and so you just have to embrace that. And so just know that life is going to change, but there is joy at every level. I am physically not the same person I was in my 20s. It's just not true. I mean, people say age is only a number. They're all liars. Age is a real thing.
Yeah, especially in your 40s.
It really
becomes
affects
real.
you, and you start sensing that, feeling that. And so if you've done things in your past that were reckless, that were whatever, man, grieve that and then confess that and say, Lord, help me in the future to not, because here's the lie. It can't get any worse. It can always get worse. So just shut that off and serve the Lord for the rest of your life in a new way, and just remind yourself of what went wrong and why you don't want to do that. That's the talk I give myself. Okay, here's what I did. Here's when I act out. Here's when I was impulsive. Here's when I walked away from God. And here's what happened. Yes, okay, that's why I follow Jesus. That's why I trust God. That's why I follow him, because my impulse is not always to follow Christ. So if you're a 7, read Galatians 5. Galatians 5 talks about the spirit and the flesh always being at war. And he's talking to believers. So when you're a 7, you're not a Christian, there's not a war. You're just on the other side.
Yeah, right.
So when you become a Christian, now there's a war. And there's this tension between what your flesh wants to do and what the Spirit wants you to do. And you're never going to be completely free from that conflict. The good news is God loves you anyways, and Christ paid the penalty for your sins on the cross. So just accept that tension and try to move forward with what God's called you to be. So.
Okay, really quick before we close, Kelly, the best party you've ever been to?
Whoa.
Start with
Appropriate
yeah.
parties. They're 7s. Good Lord.
He said he was just going to throw stuff at us, and
Here we go.
you really did. One where there's dancing. Yeah, I can't think. I've
Like
been to
getting that
several.
tall body out on the floor?
And getting my my groove on.
I was down in Brazil for Carnival.
Okay.
So
Hey, there you go. Winning.
there was,
Winning.
but man, there's a lot of skin down there.
You won.
Gracious. So
That's awesome. That was awesome. Well, this is a pretty good show. You guys, thank you for pushing
pretty
into
good.
Pretty
pushing
good, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's pretty good.
C plus show.
Well, there was not a ton of dancing. That's for sure. But I still think it's pretty good.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the highs, the lows, being real, all that good stuff.
Thanks for having us.
Love you both.
Yeah, love you
Go
too.
out
See ya.
there, 7s, and live your best life, or not, or put it on a leash.
Oh, my God.
I know. I was like, he's got a good story. You
Hold
should
on.
have. You need to ask
Producer
us what
Kelly.
our
Producer Kelly.
what our best stories about being
No
a
story.
7 are, because that's
That's
really
what I was hoping
I
for.
don't think he agrees that this is his best
it wasn't-
story.
It's a pretty
It
good
wasn't a
story.
party.
Yeah. No, it's pretty
Producer
good.
Kelly, can we keep going? Okay, here we go. All right, let's.
Oh, no.
He knew better.
Perfect.
He just let it roll.
Pastor Matt, do you need to set this off?
No, go ahead. Just ask him.
Okay, Matt Albee, it's
Oh,
your
you're
best.
asking me.
Pastor Matt wants you to tell. Actually, T Breezy is requesting a story about a plane and an airplane and a bicycle or something.
This is Brown's favorite story. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
A friend of mine owned a plane, and we were maybe a couple years out of college. His grandfather, I should say, owned a plane, and he was in the process of becoming a pilot. So he had flown the plane. many
Young
times.
7s, do not do this. Matt's a moron.
This sounds great.
This is like terrifying. Go ahead,
So
keep going.
we were out shooting pool and hanging out and doing whatever, and we're like, hey, let's go over and take the plane up. And so we think that's a great idea. And he wasn't qualified in this plane. He'd flown it a couple times, but yeah. So we get over to
Did
the
you
airport.
mention it's also night?
It's night. Yeah, it's
Well,
night.
that's what I was
Just
thinking
so
about
you
when he
know,
said
certification
plane pool.
process for day flying and night flying is a completely different process.
He
So go.
sounded confident, and so it was like 1 a.m. We go over to the airport, and we
You
look
break
at the,
into the airport.
Well, okay, well,
Tell the story. Jeez. They break into the airport.
well, hold on. So not where his plane was. We didn't have to break into that part. So
It was
we-
another airport that you broke into.
Right.
Okay,
well, I'm getting there. So we get in the plane. There's not gas in the plane. And his grandfather's going to be flying the plane the next day. He knows this. And so it's out at Redlands. And so the only all-night pump is in Riverside. So I actually say, well, there's enough gas to get up in the air, and then you can just coast to Riverside. I mean, it's like right there. Somehow that logic flies. We get up in the air and we fly to Riverside, only to find out that the pump was not open that night. So now we got a plane with no gas.
That you've stolen.
That we've borrowed.
Stolen.
Without permission. And now it's in Riverside, and he's freaking out. And so we call one of our friends, and she actually brings down, we start siphoning gas out of planes that are around the airport.
Which is sucking gas in a hose with your mouth.
It is.
Yeah.
And the gas tank is on the wing, so we have to find a ladder. We have to, and the whole time the Riverside PD helicopter is coming in to land and take off. So every time they'd come, we'd like hide under wings, and we were careful not to take too much gas. To all you pilots out there, we took a gallon or two out of a bunch of different planes.
That just means you had to suck to jumpstart the siphon on all those different planes.
So we get it to gas, we fill it up, we get in the air. Now there's too much gas. So he goes, oh, well, my grandfather's going to know. And so we have to like fly around for a couple hours to burn the amount of fuel so that we could land and walk away. Yeah, all night affair.
How fun was it?
It was fun. Yeah.
That could have gone horribly wrong.
Could have gone so stupid.
All right, Kelly, your turn.
So I was down in Mozambique, and I was walking along the beach.
Which is in Africa.
Yep.
Yes, Southern Africa. Walking along the beach, and there's a group of people that are walking with this boat, and they signal that they have extra space. And so I just trot over, grab a handle, and start walking down. And so we hop in the water, and I get in, and I'm like, oh, so what are we doing? And I look around, not a single one of them speaks English. And it is all men, all businessmen from some other country. Thankfully, my poor sweet friend, who probably has a lot of six in her, had jumped in with me because she's like, I don't know if you're supposed to go in.
She's loyal.
She's being loyal.
I'm
Yeah.
out there in the middle, and then they give all these signals to jump in. They give a language, I don't know what it was, to jump in. And so I was like, oh, sweet. I get all my like little snorkely gear on, and I jump in. And what they were signaling was there's a whale shark right next to the boat. So I hop in, and a whale shark is like the size of Texas.
Yeah.
And so I'm in there, and I'm like, backpedaling like crazy, trying to get out. And they're dying laughing because no one can communicate with me. But it was the cheapest boat ride available because I wanted to go out on a boat. And I'm sure I helped liven that sweet woman's life up. And we blessed their business trip.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell any of my unhealthy
I like that
stories.
Kelly just gets in a boat because men ask her to, and then jumps in the water because she thinks they're telling you to.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Wow.
I'll go ahead and tell your story.
No.
You said he sounded trustworthy. That's great. That's great. There we go. That's what we needed. See you next week, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Love you.